Hey everybody, it's Dr. Mike Roussel with another installment of Ask Dr. Mike. Today we're at CrossFit Lionheart, State College, Pennsylvania, and I'm here with my training partner and certified strength and conditioning specialist, Todd Bumgarner. And we're going to answer a Facebook fan's question about squatting. So today's question about squatting is a great one because I think it's a common misconception that a lot of people have, and the question is, how deep should I squat? And this is a really good question because I think you always hear people like, oh, you should squat all the way down, squat as low as you can, squat through your hamstrings, touch your calves. But for a lot of people, that's probably not ideal. And so I brought in Todd to kind of talk about figuring out for your own body what's the right squat depth, and then we'll even demonstrate a couple reps for you. So Todd, what do you think about squat depth?
I think it's a good question. Honestly, I think it really depends on the type of squat, and it obviously is individually dependent. So certain people have different mobility restrictions and different stability restrictions that are going to allow them to squat at different depths. When it comes to the body weight squat, that is a little different than a loaded squat. The loaded squat, you want to make sure that the spine stays straight and in a neutral position for the entire time. When you're doing a body weight squat for a warm-up or something like that, it's not as necessarily important, and you actually want to see the body go through a full range of motion. So what we're going to do is have Dr. Mike go through a body weight squat for us real quick. Good. Now you'll see at the bottom he gets a little of that butt tuck. With the spine in this position, it's unloaded, it's okay for this to happen. Now if you're training this in some kind of a conditioning circuit or something, that's going to be too low. But if you're just moving to warm up, you want to feel good, going down below parallel and having some of that, the hip tuck isn't such a bad thing. Now if Dr. Mike's going to do this to train a good pattern, maybe for a strength purpose or a conditioning purpose, he's going to do the same thing with his arms, but he's going to stop right there. See, he's just almost to parallel, but what we want to notice is look at his lumbar spine. There's no round, there's no butt tuck, and he's in a good position there. So go ahead and come back up. Okay, so with the body weight squat, it's a little different, so you can have two different ranges. One where you need to stay neutral, and one where you need to go. It's not as important.
So with body weight squats, if you just squat all the way down, sure, like you're an Olympic weightlifter, which I could not be, right, due to my squatting restrictions, is it better to practice that? Is it going to make you more mobile or more flexible to kind of force that pattern, or is it going to just kind of reinforce bad habits?
That's a good question. I would, when it comes to the folks that I train, we usually stay within a good range of motion and keep the lumbar spine straight because we do a lot of loaded squatting. So if you're someone that wants to squat loaded with a bar, with dumbbells, with a kettlebell, with anything like that, it's good to reinforce a good pattern. So let's go through a few coaching cues, or even just with a body weight squat before we get to the bar. Okay. So what we're going to have Dr. Mike do is he's going to set up the squat. Now, a lot of people will talk to you and have you say that you need to keep your feet on rails when you squat, and this is not the optimal position for the hips.
So what does that mean, on rails?
Okay, so both feet are parallel, and they're running straight out, like you'd be on railroad tracks. Okay. But this isn't the optimal position for our feet because it doesn't allow us to properly align our hips. So what I'm going to have Dr. Mike do is externally rotate his feet a little bit. Good. Now from this position, what I want him to do is think about twisting his feet out and into the floor. We create alignment at the hips and some good tension at the hips. This will make us stronger. To get to the bottom position with squat, there's only two simple cues that you need to do. Hips back, knees out. That's a good looking squat. So notice how before, come on back up, even when we did the squat where he stayed at parallel, where he stayed with good neutral alignment in the spine, he didn't get as deep this first time as he did this time because we put him in a better position to squat. Okay, so now we're going to add one more thing to the squat. So we got hips back, knees out, and I want you to pull yourself down into the position rather than just sinking into it. Good. So notice he got a little more range of motion, and he kept his back in a pretty good position. So come on back up. When we progress from the unloaded squat to the loaded squat, I like to take people first to the front squat for the simple reason that it's an easier squat for people to learn than the back squat because there are less mobility restrictions involved with it. And it also activates some key core musculature that allows you to train the squat a little bit more efficiently.
And I think too, just to comment, like after we kind of put into play those coaching cues with the tension, with the knees out and rotating your hips and pulling yourself down, it feels like a completely different movement. you know, like than just kind of dropping your body and standing back up, which I think you see a lot of times, especially when people are doing metabolic workouts. Right. It's basically how fast you can go up and down as many times as possible. So you really feel a different, you feel that, Todd talks about this all the time, tension. You feel a much different tension when you're doing that. And I'm assuming it transfers over a lot better to the actual squat.
Absolutely. And that's a good point. We talked a little bit about using squats for the metabolic conditioning and stuff. When you do that, going fast is important because you want to get your heart rate up and you want to get a conditioning effect. But you don't want to go so fast that things get sloppy and you get outside of what you can control with movement.
All right, so let's get onto the bar and do some front squats.
Yeah. Okay. So as we talked about with the bodyweight squat, there are different ranges of motion necessary for different types of squats. So what we're going to do is Dr. Mike and I are going to go through front squats, and we're going to use 3 different grips that you could possibly use depending on your mobility and stability restrictions.
So with front squats, it's, for most people, it's safer to squat deeper.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Okay. All right.
So what we're going to keep in mind is we're going to start first with a clean grip. So what Dr. Mike is going to do, he's going to take 2 fingers, he's going to put them right where the knurling starts on the bar, and then he's going to wrap his arms underneath and get his elbows really high. Good. He's going to take the 2 steps back, he's going to spread his feet out, he's going to do like we talked about before, and he's going to go ahead and dial his feet. Good. Now as he sits back, he's going to push his knees out, keep his torso long, spread the floor, and drive his shoulders into the bar. Those are the 2 cues you need to think about. Spread the floor apart with your feet and drive your shoulders into the bar. We're going to move on to the cross grip next, which is typically what people call the bodybuilding grip. But before we go into that, I want to go into a real quick explanation of something else with range of motion and squatting. So when you squat down to the bottom of the squat, typically what you'll see a lot of people do is squat over top of their legs this way. Okay? That's not the optimal alignment for squatting. You're not going to get as much range of motion, and it's not as safe for your spine. So when you squat, I want you to keep in mind that you want to squat between your legs and not over top of them. So as you watch Dr. Mike do those front squats, he did a really nice job of keeping his torso tall because he was able to put his upper body in between his legs rather than on top of it. So this is squatting on top of your legs. Notice that my torso aligns directly over top of my knees. And this is squatting between your legs. So it allows for a more upright position and it's a safer position for your spine.
So it's a function of slightly wider stance and spreading your knees out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Slightly wider, and also, like we talked about, when you're squatting into the bottom, hips back, knees out. So those are the 2 things that are going to put you in a good torso alignment and squatting between your legs.
Now we're going to move to the next grip, which you said is the bodybuilding grip. And now oftentimes when people talk about front squatting, you always hear like, you have to do it the first way.
Sure.
Like the way that we just did. But not everybody can do that.
Right.
I know when I get really heavy with my front squats, I just can't hold it that way.
Right.
And it kind of, you know, I feel like a lot of times you get treated like a second-class citizen for not having like that shoulder flexibility or mobility to be able to hold that. Does it really matter?
I don't think that it does. I like it more because of from a stability standpoint. So usually you're more stable if you can do this. Sometimes you get a little bit more rocking from the bar if you have your hands crossed. But really it's a function of shoulder mobility, elbow mobility, wrist mobility, and upper back strength. And if those things are lagging on you, that's not, you know, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just something you need to bring up, and until you can do that, the cross grip is okay. That's better grip.
Okay, all right.
Good. Same thing. Step back. 1, 2. Hips back, knees out. Spread the floor and drive your shoulders into the floor. Beautiful. It's a good squat. So notice that Dr. Mike isn't grabbing the bar with his hands. It's resting right across his clavicle and his shoulders, and his hands are free to move. So he also did a really nice job keeping his elbows high, which is pivotal for the alignment of your upper back. Wherever your elbows go, your upper back will follow. Wherever your upper back goes, your hips and low back will follow. So it's very important to keep your elbows high.
So if your elbows start dropping, should you terminate the set?
Absolutely, yeah, that's it. You've either done too many reps or you have too much weight on the bar and you're fatigued and you're not really training a good squat anymore. And it will eliminate, it will limit how deep you can actually go in the squat. So if you like to train a deep squat, you can't keep your elbows up, it'll limit how deep you can go safely.
Okay. So then what's the 3rd way to grip a front squat?
Great, yeah, so this is actually what I prefer for people that can't do the clean grip. rather than have them do the cross grip, what we're going to do is we're going to take lifting straps and use those to create the grip. What this does is it limits how much mobility that you actually need to be able to do the clean grip. So it allows us to create some tension by gripping really hard and keep our elbows high that we otherwise wouldn't be able to because of mobility issues in our arms and shoulders. Okay. So it's really simple. All we're going to do, take a grip strap, a lifting strap that you would typically use for deadlifts or shrugs or something like that, and we're going to wrap it around the bar. Right like this. You want to make sure they're nice. When you set these up, you don't want them real wide, you don't want them real narrow, you want them right in line with where your shoulders are going to be. Same thing on this side.
Now I gotta say, for me, this is my preferred way of doing it with these straps after Todd showed me this, this method, because later in the set, I feel like when you are starting to get fatigued and the weight starts to feel heavy, you can really, I don't know, you can grip it and you feel a lot stronger.
Yep.
Whereas like if you're doing it bodybuilder style, it's a lot easier that you do get fatigued and your elbows start to fall. I feel like this, you feel stronger later in the set.
Yeah, and it's a function of that tension that we talked about with the lower body and the feet. It's the same concept. You dial your feet out and you create that tension that comes up your legs. With this, and with any other movement where you use your grip, the harder you can grip something, the more muscle recruitment you're going to get out of your upper body, the stronger you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just in my head, but here, this is how you, when you're at the bottom of the squat, there's something about pulling your hands up to try to help pull your body up. It just makes me feel like it helps you just feel stronger.
And it's much easier. Look, he doesn't need the mobility that you would need for the clean grip, and he can still get the same benefits from it. Good squat. And this actually makes the pattern look much better for you.
So we've kind of covered actually a lot about front squatting and the different grips. So for most people, probably this is going to be the preferred grip.
Right.
So then how does this translate? We know we can squat deeper with a front squat. How does this translate into back squatting? If we could just do maybe 1 or 2 reps with a back squat to show how deep you should squat.
Sure.
That would be great.
Absolutely. The cues stay the same. So it's still hips back, knees out. The only difference is people that have very rigid upper backs, typically people in the office or someone that has some restrictions around their shoulders, it's going to be more difficult for them to squat deeply with a back squat because they don't get the extension out of their spine that they need.
So you actually don't feel like you have to back. I feel like, back squats, it's like you need to deadlift, you need to back squat,
right.
But you don't have to back squat.
Absolutely not. A squat's a squat. A front squat is actually all that I use for my clients. They rarely, if ever, put a ball in their back.
Yeah, I know that a good friend of mine, Coach Robert Dos Remedios, with all his athletes, and he probably runs through on any given day 200 athletes that he's trained, they do a lot of front squatting.
Sure, so like we said, cues stay the same. What we're going to have Dr. Mike do is go ahead and get your elbows under the bar more. So we talked about that torque before. We're creating the torque here. It's going to create the tension. From here, it's the same cue. Hips back, knees out. Spine's nice and long. Good. Spread the floor and come up. So notice that he can't achieve the same range of motion that he could with a front squat with a back squat. So go ahead again. Elbows under the bar, hips back, knees out. Spread the floor, drive your shoulders into the bar. Good.
So is it the same thing, like when you start to feel your lower back round and your hips kind of tuck?
Yeah.
That's too far.
You're too deep. That's too far.
So you want to stop right before you start to get that feeling.
Sure. And you can create more range of motion, like we talked about with the bodyweight squat, by actively pulling yourself down. At that point, you create more stability, your body's safer, and you'll achieve more range of motion.
Okay. So this has been great. So we covered bodyweight squats, front squats and the different grips, and then also back squats and the depth for back squats. So if you're concerned about how deep you should back squat, maybe you should start front squatting first. Thanks, Todd. This has been awesome. I think we gave a lot more with this question than I was expecting. So that's going to wrap it up for this installment of Ask Dr. Mike. If you have any questions about this, because I know we covered a lot, just post a comment below the video at YouTube or my blog at mikeroussel.com. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and come back and check out our Ask Dr. Mike videos every Friday. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for tuning in.